Don't you recognize me, Miss Hannah? I'm Frank Hewitt. I don't recognize no traitors. The world celebrated Audie Murphy as one of the most decorated heroes of World War II. But what people didn't see were the memories that refused to music fade. Years later, Murphy would reflect on the moments that haunted him, the kind that stayed long after the medals were awarded and the camera started music rolling. His recollection wasn't about glory or recognition. It was about the emotional toll, the quiet struggles, and the reality of what he carried with him. Even when the world thought the war was over, the hardship that forged Murphy. Now, to really understand the legend of Audie Murphy, it all starts on June 20th, 1925 in the small, roughage town of Kingston, Music, Texas. He wasn't just part of a big family. He was the seventh of 12 children. Life from the jump was unstable. Work was scarce. So the family was constantly moving, chasing any opportunity to earn a living. It meant no real sense of home, just a cycle of packing up and starting over. Then came the Great Depression, and whatever fragile stability they had, music completely collapsed. The Murphys were already hanging on by a thread, music, and now they were deep in survival mode. His father drifted from farm to farm looking for work, while his mother took whatever jobs she could find just to keep food on the table. Childhood, as most people understand it, didn't exist for Audie. By the time he reached the 5th grade, school had to go. He stepped into the role of provider early, picking cotton under the relentless Texas sun, delivering newspapers, doing whatever work he could find. Those years weren't just hard. They shaped him. They built a kind of toughness that would define everything he did later. The numbers from that era tell part of the story. Unemployment soared past music, 25%. 1 in 4 people couldn't find work. Families lost everything not because of bad decisions, but because the system itself collapsed. For the Murphys already struggling, it pushed them to the edge. Every child old enough to contribute had to work just to survive. Things took another devastating turn when his father abandoned the family. At just 16, Audie was carrying responsibilities most adults wouldn't know how to handle. Then came an even heavier blow. His mother passed away. The family scattered with his younger siblings sent off to orphanages. It was the kind of loss that doesn't just hurt, it hardens you. Growing up in that environment carved a very clear, almost rigid sense music of right and wrong into him. The world in his eyes became simple. You do what needs to be done. So when news broke of the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, he didn't hesitate. At 17, he decided he was going to war. There was just one problem. He didn't look the part. He was underage, underweight, and barely 5 feet 5 inches. The Marines and airborne units took one look at him and turned him away. But Murphy wasn't built to quit. He spent months forcing himself to gain weight, living on bananas and milk. And with help from his sister, he adjusted his birth records just enough to pass. On June 30th, 1942, he was officially sworn into the United States Army. Training changed everything. The structure, the discipline, it suited him. He found his rhythm quickly. But more than anything, he wanted to prove himself in combat. Assigned to the 3rd Infantry Division, he got his first taste of action in North Africa. But the real test came in July 1943 music, during the Allied invasion of Sicily. The mission was straightforward, music on paper. Land, push inland, and take the port city of Messina. In reality, it was exhausting, music chaotic and far from heroic. Long marches, constant hunger, unreliable pack mules, and a kind of fatigue that wears a man down mentally as much as physically. For Murphy, though this environment felt familiar, he had grown up in hardship, so instead of breaking under it, he adapted. The idea of war as some grand adventure faded quickly. To him, it became work. Dangerous, brutal work, but work all the same. That mindset showed music, itself in moments that would define him. When he spotted 2 enemy officers trying to escape across an open field, he didn't hesitate or overthink it. He acted. Later, when asked why, his response was simple and direct. That was the job. Even illness couldn't keep him out of the fight. After being sidelined by malaria, he pushed to return to his unit as soon as possible. And once he was back, he didn't ease in. He went music straight into the chaos. During one engagement, his company was pinned down in a rock quarry under heavy German fire. Instead of staying low, Murphy stepped up. He organized the men, directed their fire, and then did something most wouldn't dare. He advanced toward the enemy positions. His aggression broke the stalemate. Music, the Germans pulled back. After Sicily, there was no rest. The campaign pushed north through Italy, each mile harder than the last. Then came the disastrous landing at Anzio, where Murphy once again found himself trapped music under relentless fire. He later joked about feeling like a fugitive from the law of averages, a way of masking just how often he had stared death in the face. By now, it was clear he had something rare, a natural understanding of the battlefield. He could read situations quickly, make decisions under pressure, and act without hesitation. Combined with his discipline, it made him incredibly effective. But that effectiveness came at a cost. As the campaign dragged on, the men around him started disappearing. Friends, comrades, familiar faces, gone one by one. Eventually, Murphy became the last surviving member of the original 235 soldiers from his unit who had started the invasion. By 1944, the war shifted to France. It was there that Audie Murphy would face a defining moment of his life, the point where danger and legend would collide, the invasion that changed Murphy. To understand what was about to unfold in southern France, it helps to zoom out for a second. The idea for this invasion, Operation Dragoon, had been circulating among Allied leadership as far back as August 1943. It wasn't just a side mission. Leaders like George Marshall and Dwight D. Eisenhower, backed by Franklin D. Roosevelt saw it as a critical move to support the massive push happening in the North with Operation Overlord. The logic was simple but strategic. Hit southern France, protect the flank of the forces fighting in Normandy, and maybe most importantly, secure major ports like Marseilles to keep supplies flowing. Without those ports, the Allied war machine would eventually stall. By the early hours of August 15, 1944, everything was in place. Offshore, the fleet sat ready. The night before, Allied naval guns had already begun pounding the coastline near Ramadu, softening up German positions. The Germans knew something was coming, but they had no idea how massive it would be. At first light, the invasion exploded into motion. Air strikes and naval bombardments hit in perfect coordination, turning the coastline into a storm of fire and noise. Inside one of those landing crafts, Audie Murphy stood with the men of his company, 3rd Platoon, watching it all unfold as they moved toward the shore. Even with overwhelming firepower backing them, the fear was real. Around him, the men didn't look like heroes yet. They looked human, sick, tense, and bracing themselves for what they knew music was coming. It was messy, uncomfortable, and far from the clean image of war people imagined from a distance. At exactly 8 a.m., the ramps dropped. Major Keith Ware's 1st Battalion, including Murphy's unit, surged forward into the surf. Men stumbled through the water, trying to stay upright while carrying heavy gear. Some lost their footing, others lost equipment, but everyone kept moving. There was no time to recover, only time to push forward. And almost immediately, the reality of the battlefield hit. Within about 40 minutes, the defenses on Yellow Beach had collapsed, but it wasn't without cost. The 1st Battalion had already taken around 10% casualties in that short span. The landing had worked, but it had drawn blood. There was no pause to process it. Once the beach was secured, the mission continued. B Company regrouped and pushed inland toward Ramatu and Sanrope, staying aligned with the broader objective of driving west toward the key ports. Looking back, many of the soldiers would describe the landing as almost surgical in its execution. Despite the chaos on the ground, the larger operation moved with precision. Naval bombardments had shattered defenses. Airstrikes had weakened strong points. And rocket fire had even triggered mines before troops reached the sand. But it wasn't just military planning that made the difference. Local French resistance fighters played a quiet but crucial role. They marked minefields, cleared paths, and gave Allied troops an edge before the first shots were even fired. As the 15th Regiment advanced inland, they quickly ran into their first major obstacle. About a mile from the beach, the terrain suddenly turned unforgiving. a steep cliff rising into dense woods filled with boulders. At the top sat a heavily fortified German position, a reinforced concrete pillbox with a coastal gun aimed directly at the beachhead. The French underground had already warned about it. This wasn't just another position. It was a strong point built to hold, and it sat directly music in the path of the American advance. There was no way around it. The only option was straight through. That responsibility fell to the 1st Battalion, and at the front of that push was B Company. By 10 a.m., the assault on what the men called Pillbox Hill was underway. This wasn't open ground or an easy climb. It was a steep, punishing slope choked with thick brush, scrub oaks, music, and scattered boulders. Visibility was almost non-existent, which made it the perfect hunting ground for hidden snipers and machine gun.